On today's show, David Bilinsky, longtime practice management and legal tech leader and fellow of the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution at the University of Massachusetts. We'll be talking about how lawyers should prepare for retirement realistically, not just an ideal scenario, to protect their firms and their families in the event of the unexpected, like disability or even death, ensuring the right plans are in place to create stability and peace of mind.
The statistic maintained by the U.S. government, we talked about the odds of dying at age 65, 20 to 30 men will die at age 65, a little less than that for women, 15 to 25 out of 1,000. But the disability rates go much higher. If you're 65 or older, they are stating that 40 to 50% of people have some sort of disability.
Welcome to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring what makes law firms thrive. I'm your host, Jason Marsh. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and accomplished law firm owners in our space. Together, we'll dive deep into law firm operations, marketing, technology, finance, and everything else you need to build an incredible firm that allows you to live your best life. Hello, welcome back to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm Jason. Joining me today is David Bilinsky. Hey, David, it's so nice to have you here.
Great to be here, Jason.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's awesome to see you here. So I've been reading some things that you've written about, particularly when preparing for retirement as a lawyer, really any of us, that it isn't only about planning for some ideal, neatly defined retirement that we all envision, but it's really about thinking about and preparing for the unexpected. Because I think most of us picture this retirement as we'll define it on our own terms. And as you pointed out, that reality can be very different, whether it's health issues or disabilities, other life events that effectively force us to make these decisions sooner than we might like. And of course, as an attorney, that can come with real consequences, professionally, financially, ethically. And that's for you as an attorney, for the firm, your clients that you represent. So today I want to talk about how lawyers should be thinking about retirement more realistically, and importantly, what needs to be in place in the event something unexpected happens, and how to prepare in a way that creates peace of mind. And we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording here, but as I'm going through the notes today, I feel like, some of this stuff can feel heavy because these are not things that we want to think about, that life isn't going to go exactly the way we want, that things do happen. But anyway, we'll get into all that. But before we do, I want to just give you an introduction to the audience. So David was a practice management consultant and lawyer with the Law Society of British Columbia, where he spent years helping lawyers think more strategically about how they run their practices and navigate change in the profession. He's a fellow at the College of Law Practice Management. He's a fellow of the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution at the University of Massachusetts. He's been a past editor-in-chief of the ABA's Law Practice magazine, past chair of the ABA Tech Show. So David's been deeply involved in legal tech and a practice management advisor for decades. So David, he brings a really thoughtful perspective on how lawyers not just operate day to day, but how they should be planning for the long term. Again, including something that I don't think we talk about enough, which is how to prepare for retirement and particularly the unexpected. So David, most lawyers, they think about retirement as something to plan for as this controlled transition that's going to happen exactly on our terms. But as you pointed out, sadly, that's not always how it happens. Sometimes it's forced, right? Whether it's health or disability or something else. And you shared a couple of stories of some close colleagues of yours, both practicing lawyers, one being told that he has terminal cancer, horrible, another in a serious auto accident that left him unable to practice, and then your story of where you just turned 60, you were literally told you had to stop working immediately or you were going to face some serious health consequences. So you went from running marathons, thinking about, hey, I'm going to work into my mid-60s, having a vision of then, comfortably retiring to a life of skiing, which we both enjoy, fly fishing, writing, getting together with friends, traveling, doing all the stuff that we all think about as retirement. And all that changed in an instant. And so when we picture the retirement as something that we're going to ease into or do it in the way we choose, it can be something very different than that, where the decision is made for you instantly. And as you put it quite succinctly in your article, I'm going to try to quote some, I think this is Latin here, "Accedet stercore," or in English, "shit happens." So David, first,
Well, that's go
yeah.
ahead.
So first, how are you doing today? And then can you walk us through how those experiences that I just described changed the way you think about retirement and planning for the unexpected?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Jason. There was I had a very good friend in the section, Steve Gallagher, out of the East Coast, and Steve moved into this area of retirement and retirement planning, and we used to have many conversations. We got along like wildfire, and then he died from cancer, and so I kind of feel like I'm carrying on his legacy and his work, and I owed a debt of gratitude to Steve for all of our conversations and for leading me in many of these directions in terms of what we are thinking about. For me, how am I doing now? Well, when you have a heart condition, you always have a heart condition. You don't outgrow it. You go up and down, and they change your medications, and then they try different things. And my latest tribulation was that they stuck me on a couple of statins, and most people are on statins and are absolutely fine. Well, I was one of the 5 to 10% of people that crashed and burned on statins, and
Oh man.
finally,
Because those
finally
statins
went
are
off
just
of.
incredible in what they're actually able to do. I'm on a statin, and obviously, I've heard even people that everybody should be on a statin, and so you're saying the statins, you can't take them.
No, the muscle ache, the muscle pain, the muscle
Oh,
fatigue, the feeling like you don't want to get out of bed in the morning because it's just going to hurt. Getting out of a chair, you have to go 1, 2, 3 and up, or at least that was my experience. I mean, a lot of other people, there's a lot of discussion on the web about statins. And as I say, for most people, they're wonderful, but not always for everybody. So anyway, that's where I am right now. I'm going through that. Recommended some sort of an injection, something that starts with a P, PLP or something like that. So I'm going to wait for that and see how that one does. So it's a continuing evolution, so to speak. So, but on the other hand, you put that into a compartment, you put it aside, and you say, I have still the rest of my life to live, and I'm still skiing. I'm not skiing the way I used to. I used to be a ski patroller, and now I'm confining myself to the blues and greens, and I don't do a full day, but I sure as heck like getting up there into the sunshine and the brilliant snow, and loving the exercise and loving the whole environment. Just being up in the mountains does something for me, and I think that's really partially of what you have to look forward to in retirement is more of those kind of experiences, and build yourself towards the things that are really meaningful for you, and take steps to reach for them all the time.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad you are able to enjoy your retirement, and it may not be perfectly what you envision, but you are still getting. I mean, it's only if you're still getting up into the mountains, being able to do a little skiing, even if it's just the blue runs and a half a day at that. That's still pretty nice. But again, that's probably not exactly the way you pictured it. You probably were planning to go through your double black diamond mogul runs and, fly
No,
fishing
no.
with your friends and all of that. And so, but that gets us the thrust of this conversation is that, right, we all have this vision of what retirement's going to look like, no matter what age we currently are. But the reality is all that's coming. It's all ahead of us, and how we plan for it or not, we're going to have consequences of dealing with that. And so in terms of the unexpected events that come up, you talked about some pretty stark examples. Certainly your two friends, one lost his life. I think the other one may be still alive, but not highly functional anymore. And of course, what you're dealing with. And so these examples around health and disability, and this is what I was saying earlier, it's like it's heavy stuff to talk about because none of us want to think, we want to think we're going to be healthy right up until the day we die at a ripe old age, doing all the things we want to do. But that isn't always the case. So David, you talked in your article, there were some pretty stark examples, right, around health. And I think particularly around the idea of disability, but when we think about this type of stuff, how common is it really for lawyers to be forced into retirement unexpectedly?
Well, I think The statistic maintained by the U.S. government, we talked about the odds of dying at age 65, 20 to 30 men will die at age 65, a little less than that for women, 15 to 25 out of 1,000. But the disability rates go much higher. If you're 65 or older, they are stating that 40 to 50% of people have some sort of disability. Now, whether that impairs your ability to practice law or not is a question that they don't address, but I guess you can into it. If you have sensory or cognitive difficulties, obviously you can't carry on, and then you're forced to rely on what other areas of income you've established to carry yourself through. Hopefully you have disability insurance through your employment or privately, as the case may be.
So David, let me just stop you for a second, because I want to get into those specific details, but you just touched on, and I want to ask more broadly, but let's say you are, well, whatever age, but maybe you're approaching retirement age, and you are disabled in some way that does require you to stop working almost overnight in very much the same way. What are the consequences in that moment when something like that happens to you, your practice, your family?
Well, there's a number of different consequences. I mean, financially, your income drops, and unfortunately, your debts that you're carrying on a month-to-month basis do not just go away. So you're left in a cash crunch almost inevitably right off the bat. So you have to scramble to try and cover those and make up for somehow the income that you've lost. I mean, disability insurance comes into this into a certain degree, but don't believe for a minute that it replaces the income that you lost. It's probably closer to about 65%, at least in my experience. And so the other amount you have to scramble for, and whether that's savings or your spouse's income or whatever the case may be. So
but that's scary. That's a scary thought,
it's
right?
Very scary.
Because
absolutely,
when we're healthy and working and our money's coming in the door every month, and it's just everything's normal, it's fine. But when all of that, and none of us, I don't think, or not many of us think about when that's immediately disrupted, yeah, that is a scary thing. Depending on what obligations you have financially, how much you're talking about, your income's going to drop. How much savings do you have? Can you reduce your expenses commensurately?
And also understand that that's occurring at the same time that your health has just gone down the tubes. So you're not exactly at 100% to deal with this stuff. And so that throws a burden on your spouse or your significant other, as the case may be. And you have to try and work through this together, reduce your expenses down, make accommodations as the case may be, and then take it from there. So, I mean, that's one of the aspects is the whole financial bucket issue, trying to deal with that. And then do you have disability insurance? I would hope that you have arranged it either through your employment or privately, as the case may be. I would advise it wholeheartedly. If you get caught in one of these circumstances without disability insurance, oh my goodness, I would hate to think about what you're going through. And then, of course, there's all the medical side of it, whether or not you have a medical plan that will cover your extra expenses, medications, which can be horribly expensive in some cases, or do you qualify under any of the government programs, Medicare, Medicaid, all of that sort of stuff. And do you have, in the event that you are long-term disabled, do you have long-term care insurance that would take care of you if you were in that kind of circumstance? So there's all of that to consider about.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, because there's more,
no,
right?
No, I want to. There's more and more and more. Yes.
I do want to spend a moment on the financial aspect of it. That you've been mentioning, and we'll get into sort of all these other consequences that you ultimately have to deal with as well. But I think, so from a financial standpoint, what should we lawyers generally be evaluating when we're thinking about our retirement finances, right? Because I think we all do that big picture. We want to make sure we have money to do the things and live the lifestyle that we want in retirement. But how do you think about it in terms of the unexpected?
Well, I think hopefully the way to deal with it is to be proactive ahead of time before any of this happens. Hopefully you have consulted with a financial planner or an investment counselor, someone who understands that aspect of life and can help you set up the appropriate retirement saving plans that are relevant and will be meaningful to you. Those hopefully will be in place that will help buffer any of the circumstances. I would also supplement any retirement plans, retirement benefit plans that you have, savings, with appropriate insurance. And
this is what I want to ask about, right? Because you mentioned two things, and I know just because I've sort of heard about them sort of in my own family, but number one is the disability insurance that you mentioned.
Yeah.
How important that is. I've even had my sort of insurance agent reaching out, offering me. I like being well insured across a lot of different things, but it can be expensive. And then the other part is the long-term care insurance. So can you talk about the importance of both of those and what the role of each of those is? Because I think in terms of what we're talking about as far as the unexpected, those things can play a critical role. You don't want to pay for them now when you don't need them. I mean, this is all insurance, right? But God forbid something happens.
Yeah. When I was in private practice for 20 years, I carried my own private policy. And then when I joined the Law Society, of course, you can't be double insured. That's one of the things the insurance companies make sure about. So we were required to be enrolled within the employer's disability plan, which was not quite up to the level of my private plan. And that's the one I had to rely on when my heart condition came by. And so there are different aspects like own occupation and any occupation. Are you disabled from your own occupation of being a lawyer, in which case the disability insurance kicks in? Or is the plan any occupation so they can demand that you sell pencils on the corner because it's an income and notwithstanding, and you have to do that. So those are kind of threshold issues that you have to look at. But definitely I'd make sure that you have both some sort of life insurance. That's in case of death, your spouse or family is looked after. They've got a chunk of money that they can use for whatever purposes, probably pay off debts like mortgages or funeral expenses, that sort of thing, because those are paid almost immediately.
And so I think that one, life insurance, most people know what that is. And I think most people listening would know what that is and have it. But that's where I think it kind of stops. And this includes me as well. And then, you think about what you mentioned a moment ago, disability insurance, and then the long-term care. And so how do those work particularly? So the disability, I think that's interesting. You're saying you may not be able to do you may not continue to practice law, but hey, you can go make coffee and work in a coffee shop or something. That might be sufficient, and so you have to consider that. And then what about the long-term care one? I mean, and that can probably kick in not just when you're old and feeble, but if something happens and you're disabled. Like, do those work together? Are they separate policies?
I think they're separate policies. I think you can look at it as life insurance is for your family, like your next. Disability insurance is for you, to look after you, to make sure that you're going to be, your income of some sort of level is going to continue, or you're going to be able to carry your own to a certain degree within the family. And then there's the health insurance after that, to look after you in the event that you require sort of long-term care. And that varies from all over, in-house care all the way to palliative care. And there's a whole rainbow of different services that could be covered by this. There's also critical incident care, and I'm not going to go into insurance because I'm not an expert.
Yeah. But just to know that some of these things are worth looking into and understanding how they work and when they kick in, what coverage you're going to have, and the types of scenarios you're planning for. These are the unexpected things. Again, I hate to think about this stuff personally. I hate even the idea, I'm going to be spending money on disability care, that I'm perfectly fine, I'm healthy. But as you mentioned, a lot of things can happen in life. Things do happen.
The Monty Python foot from the sky can come down and crush you at a moment, and you have absolutely no idea it's coming. And that's really what you're protecting either yourself or your loved ones against. So
because I think as we're talking about this, again, it's like, these are tough things to think about, but I think the the upside, the positive way of framing it is going, okay, what we're doing here, let's not dwell on this actually happening. We're just trying to give peace of mind, not just for ourselves, but for our families. We all obviously love our families. We want to make life easy on them should something happen. And also, if we're in a law practice and we have other law partners and business partners, we want to make sure things go the way we want, particularly as you mentioned. I think this is key too, because I think I'm thinking about this. Oh, I'm in a perfectly healthy, fine state of mind to help figure these things out. But the reality is, if you are having some type of medical situation, you're not going to be where you are today. You're going to be in some diminished capacity, and you're certainly going to have other things you're worried about medically and just being healthy and continuing to live. And so all of these things become inherently more complicated, right?
Sure. And if you're in a partnership, you want to make sure that your partners carry enough insurance on you, so that if you do become disabled, they can buy out your interest in the partnership. Your spouse ends up with cash, they end up with a law practice, and everybody's able to walk away happy. So again, it's just planning to make sure things go comfortably for the people that you care about, your partners and your spouse, your family.
Okay, so let's talk about what you just mentioned in terms of how to properly manage the practice and the law firm itself and what needs to be in place to properly wind down your responsibilities, your equity in the firm, setting it up so, as you mentioned, your spouse can have your shares in the firm purchased and you get a cash payout. These are all things that can and very well should happen, but you've got to plan for them to make sure that sort of succession is going to go exactly the way you want. So how should that look?
Well, I think if you don't have a partnership agreement or a shareholders agreement, you need one. And it should also be backed with appropriate insurance, disability as well as life insurance. So as I say, life insurance, you pick the bucket. Your partners use those proceeds to buy out your shares or your partnership interest. Your family receives the funds. They're compensated for your share in the partnership, and your partners gather your share of the partnership, your practice, and they carry on. Everybody goes away happy, and there's no. I've heard, as a practice advisor, I've heard of circumstances where there wasn't that in place, and then the spouse is suddenly having to deal with the deceased lawyer's partners, who may or may not be all that friendly to him or her, as the case may be, and so you end up with this spat, and you really don't want to put your spouse and your family through that. So again, it's just taking care of those
after losing you or having you being in a difficult situation. And then what about? All right, so I think that's really important information to be mindful of. What about, like, more specifically, like if you're a lawyer, you become disabled or worse, what about client files, trust accounts, just your obligations to your practice, to your clients that you're representing? What do you do about how does that stuff work? And maybe you're a solo, or maybe if you have partners, I would imagine that's great. That helps to soften that and things can transition. But if you don't have that, so maybe talk about that for a moment.
Sure. If you're a solo, I think a custodian is going to have to be appointed to take over your practice and farm out your files and collect whatever receivables have to be collected and wind down your estate. If you live in a state or a province where there's a practice management advisor, they can be a tremendous help in this regard. I did help people in this way when I was with the Law Society for 20 years, and the poor widow is just cast about. They never practiced law, probably, and suddenly they're forced into dealing with the old files. They're forced to deal with the tax implications of all of this. It's just a pain. Hopefully, they have a trusted lawyer friend that they can bring in, separate from the firm, because you do need that. I think it's a conflict of interest if they go to someone in the firm, and they can start working their way through untangling the mess that's going to be left as a result of your passing or disability, as the case may be.
And so how do you do that? Do you just reach out to your other lawyers that you're friendly with in the community and say, okay, I'm just thinking about if something were to happen to me, a succession plan for my family, for the practice, and ask them, is this something to formalize? I would like you to step in on my behalf. Or is this all the result of you haven't planned anything and now your spouse is scrambling and the advice is just go find another trusted friend that also is a lawyer that can step in and have some sense of what's going on to help you through it?
In BC, where I practice, there is a requirement to have a custodian, to name a custodian in a formal document to take over your practice in the event that you can. So that's now. I don't know if that's the case in every state or other province. I suspect not. So if it's not a requirement, I would do it voluntarily. Talk to your friends and say, "Hey, I'll do you if you do me," kind of thing. You probably will need more of a solicitor or a transactional lawyer to look after it all and pack it up, and hopefully somebody with experience in this area. But it's definitely one of the things that you need to think about. Yeah.
And so what happens now if you don't do any of that? An attorney becomes incapacitated or passes away, and they've got nothing in place, no plan. What does that look like by contrast?
That's called a mess. And I think it all depends on where you're practicing and what degree. Is it the state bar? I know where here in BC, we do have a custodial department that will step in those circumstances and get a court order to take over your practice and start winding it down and all the rest of that. But typically that doesn't come cheap. So, I mean, your estate is going to suffer from the costs of having to take care of all of that. Where if you had done it with your custodian, hopefully it's a little bit more advantageous, may I put it that way, to your spouse and your... If you're in a partnership situation, they probably have already set something up. If they haven't, they should, and set that in place with the appropriate levels of insurance and all the rest of that. I guess that's about...
And is this essentially similar to what might happen in a personal scenario? Like, whereas if you haven't put your trust in place, you're just going to end up in probate based on whatever the laws of the state are, and that's going to cost you a chunk of change to go through that process. I mean, I think some states it's statutory in terms of what the attorneys are going to charge. They're going to take a percentage of the estate, and that's just the way it's going to be. And so that's just what happens similarly if you don't plan. So David, I want to get into kind of another section of sort of how this plays out. And maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be that there's anything even unexpected has happened, but this gets into the heart of retiring and the emotional and lifestyle change that you have to be prepared for. And so what does that look like? Because you've talked a little bit about that as well.
I've talked to a lot of lawyers who have gone through that transition from being in practice to suddenly being retired. I think some people put up with it quite well. They transition over to a less structured lifestyle. I think some lawyers transition over to a less structured lifestyle, but other lawyers, I mean, they've been practicing law for 40, maybe 50 years, and then suddenly there's a gulf in front of them.
Like how you fill that time, right? What are you going to do with yourself?
It's multifaceted. It's how do you fill the time? It's the fact that you've gone from talking to, thousands of people a year. I mean, we used to track our contacts at the Law Society, and every year I talk to well over 2,500 people. I suddenly went from there to talking to like 100.
That's so interesting. I've never heard it quantified like that.
Yeah, well, probably because most people don't take statistics, don't keep statistics about this, but we did. And suddenly you went from a social animal to craving social contact. And I've read many articles that have said, nurture your contacts, nurture your friends, be sure to keep in contact. I mean, there are stages in retirement. The first one, of course, is the honeymoon stage. It's like being on vacation. Hey, I'm free. I don't have to go to the office, blah, 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 blah. And then reality starts setting in as you move down the road. And you become more and more isolated. There is the whole... You used to call yourself a practicing lawyer, and now you're not, and people don't call on you for your advice anymore. And that whole mental concept of who am I now has to come to bear, and you have to come to grips with that at some point in time. And then there's the changing family dynamics, as I say. If your spouse hasn't retired, they go off to work every day, and you're still sitting around the house twiddling your thumbs, probably reading far too much CNN and that sort of thing. And you have to find new things to fill your time. Now, hopefully, you've developed a number of different hobbies or pastimes that you want, whether it's music or a big part should be heading off to the gym every day and keeping yourself fit. But there's the social aspect. How are you going to get that kind of contact with people and keep your mind going and contact people that you like? And I found that I've got groups of friends. Some are lawyers, some are non-lawyers. I like both. And I'm kind of like the mover this way. I will say, let's get together and use Doodle or whatever tool is out there to schedule a time so we can get together and just talk about things that's happening in our lives and make sure that social aspect is going through. Maybe you play bridge, maybe you play chess, maybe you play hockey. I don't know, or tennis, as the case may be for people that live more in the southern areas.
Interesting thing there is, and especially if you see, and I've read, and I know my wife reads the research that comes out periodically about what does it mean to stay healthy as you get older. And one of the big things that always comes up is having an active social life, right? That you're not living in isolation. And so obviously, I think it sounds like what you're saying is you go from having your job as an attorney where you're dealing with thousands of people a year to now all of a sudden you go from 2,000 to 100 or 200. I mean, that's a precipitous drop off just in the level of engagement you have with other human beings that has been built into your life. And so my dad used to tell me when I was a young guy, when you don't have a job, you make a job of getting a job or finding a job. And it sounds like that's kind of what that is here. Your job goes from being an attorney to just filling your days with, I was going to say productive. It doesn't even, I don't think necessarily have to be productive, but something that gives you back that structure, maybe some sense of purpose and certainly engagement with other people, right?
Gives you a sense of meaning, a sense of you're still helping people somehow. I mean, I'm on our strata council, so that still exercises my legal muscles, so to speak, and dealing with that kind of stuff. So you need to seek out ways to keep your mind challenged. Hopefully that is different. It's different things for different people. Volunteering, sometimes it's involvement in community affairs, whatever the case, whatever drives your crank, look for it and then actually intentionally go for it.
Yeah, it seems like you need to be very thoughtful and intentional about the process because otherwise, as you say, you're just going to be sitting home doom scrolling the news on your phone, and that's not going to do you any good at all, of course. And so what about because you did touch on this, I'm curious about family dynamics because as you're saying this, I could just imagine I'm home all day with my wife just driving her crazy or, any of us, our spouses, like you say, you're used to having all these business partners, your clients, you're just busy and then all of a sudden that all you have is one audience now and that probably puts a lot of pressure on your spouse that maybe isn't used to having you around or hearing all day long. So how does that go?
Well, recognize it as being a dynamic because originally it was you and your spouse and a family. You were busy raising kids, so you had a shared purpose and you went through all of that. And then eventually you become empty nesters, and then you have to redefine your relationship there. And now suddenly one of you is not working, and you have to go through that redefinition. And sometimes it means that one of the spouses has to get the heck out of the house for a certain number of hours today just to keep both of you sane. And I know for me, my wife was still working while I went on disability. So it would be like, see you, dear, I'll try and have dinner ready for you when you get home kind of thing. And you've got to reimagine what your life is going to be like, fit all of that stuff in. So yeah, there is some thinking to think about in that regard. If you're on the usual retirement track where you can see 65 or whatever coming and you progress down there, you've got a little bit more time to try and plan for it. If it's suddenly unexpected, you're thrown into the void and you're going to have to try and scramble a little bit more. Fortunately, there's a lot of material on the web that you can read that will help
I
you
think
through it.
Yeah, and that's the scary part. It's when the unexpected thing happens. And again, we're just trying to say, let's plan for this sort of thing so that if it does, your family, yourself, you're protected, you're going to have peace of mind around that. So let's just talk. I mean, because I know, you've talked about, we don't have to go too deep into this because there's plenty of resources, but just in terms of like your estate planning and documentation, what are some of the core documents every attorney should have in place?
Well, the estate planning, yeah. So we've talked about the health insurance and the life insurance and disability insurance. So we'll leave that alone. Then I think you should have a will, and then an enduring and durable power of attorney, so that if something happens to you, someone can step in and take over whatever they need to take over. And then I would consult with an estate planning attorney and talk about how you want your estate to be distributed, whether or not there could be people within your family that have special needs and therefore need trusts established. Are there things that you would like benefited by way of legacies to charitable institutions or whatever the case may be? So you want to make sure kind of globally you've taken all of that into consideration and set it aside. And the thing is, you can do it now. I would revisit it every 5 years because things change, and so don't do it and think that it's done. Do it and then diarize it, and then 5 years from now, dig it out and say, okay, is this still current? Do we have to make new plans for Jane or Jenny or whatever, Tom or whatever the case may be? And then your own care in terms of, okay, if you become disabled, where do you want to be cared for? Is it possible for you to stay in your home? If you become disabled, things like stairs can become a huge obstacle. So is your current home necessarily the best place for you if you are in that kind of situation? Again, it helps to talk to your spouse and say, are we both on the same page here? If we have to, do you mind leaving the house behind and we move to a rancher or a condominium, one story, wheelchair perhaps friendly, as the case may be? And sort of go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, I've seen this in my own life with other family, but just the idea of stairs. What a real obstacle they can become with even just minimal disabilities. Like not long ago, I hurt my knee. I mean, it hurts a lot. I'm better now, but it hurt a lot going up and down stairs and, really hanging onto those arm rails. And so you think when you're a bit older and you're weaker and you do get an injury of some sort, the home you live in, how that is set up, particularly the stairs, that can have a big impact on your lifestyle, not just for you, but for your family, because whatever you're going through, your family is going to be dealing with that as well in some shape or form, whether it's a caregiver or just somebody that has to listen to you talking about how it really hurts going up and down, these stairs or whatever else you're dealing with. So anyway, I think just in terms of the estate plan, like you mentioned here, it's just, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of details and decisions that you're going to have to make within that, what's going to happen. And so when you do it, so you say you need to do it and then revisit it every 5 years. But my guess is probably the lion's share of the work is to get it done initially. And then, every 5 years or so, you're just doing some fine tuning. It's not a huge undertaking every 5 years.
No, I agree with that. It's a tweak, but I still would do the tweak.
Yeah.
But two of my friends have just had hip replacements and the other one had a knee replacement, and it's amazing how those things come on. And you're right about the stairs. They become an immediate obstacle in these circumstances. And so what would you do if you have to go through this, as the case may be?
And not to mention those stairs, they become dangerous too for people that are not as strong as they once were. So there's a lot to consider. All right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, kind of jumping around, but I want to try to bring it all together and just think about, for an attorney that hasn't really thought all of this through yet, where's the place to start?
I think the place to start is a conversation with your spouse and make sure that both of you are on the same page, because you're talking about long-term objectives and goals and what do both of you want from retirement, and assuming that you're both capable and all the rest of that. So we're in a normal situation and you're going to hang up the robe one day. And is the idea to travel? Is the idea to spend it on the golf course together? Is she going to go off and see her girlfriends and you're going to go off and see your golf buddies and that sort of thing? What does retirement look like? And then once you have that idea, how do you build stairs to get there? How do you build the kind of lifestyle that you want? What would be your income requirements? What would be your home requirements? Because maybe you want to move from where you are now. I've met many people that once they retire, they go down to Arizona or someplace like that. I mean, they don't want to stay necessarily where they are. The kids are gone and they're off to make the next stage of their life happen. And so I think your spouse is the first one. Then the next one would be to talk, if you need to, talk to your partners and talk to an estate planning attorney and start working on the advice that they will give you in terms of, there'll be a lot of questions that they'll ask you about, and you'll have to go home and think about them and then start putting shape to the documents that you'll need, perhaps to an investment advisor or a financial planner. I think that is almost a given. If you don't work with one, start, because if you start planning for your retirement now, you'll be much better off. I mean, there are ways to do that, to save up for that, and it's beneficial, really beneficial if it ever comes to that kind of thing. Look at your partners, your partnership agreement or shareholder agreement, and are you properly taken care of there in case you have to leave the practice? Do they have the kind of financial life insurance in place to buy you out? One of the things that I would recommend is that you take about $10,000 to $15,000 and put it into either a joint account with your spouse, or if you don't have a spouse, with your children. And the reason, and make sure it has right of survivorship so that it's not frozen in the event that you pass on. That can fund your funeral costs and all the unexpected expenses that come up at that point in time. Otherwise, your kids or your spouse are going to suddenly start scrambling for monies to pay all of these bills and things right at the thing. We did that with my mom. We did that with my father-in-law. It makes such a difference in terms of smoothing things out and making sure that you have the resources available to make things happen, as the case may be.
Yeah, and that's great advice. I mean, yeah, I lost my father. This is going back about 9 years or so now. But yeah, it happens, and then all of a sudden, for many people, you're immersed in something you may not have ever dealt with before. But yes, there's a ton of expenses that start happening right away, and there's a long list. And so what you're saying is get a joint account that you're also, whether, I don't know, maybe it's a child, obviously your spouse, that they can tap into that right away. It's assuming you don't have maybe a life insurance payout that would be coming, that you have that money ready to go to deploy for all so you can focus on the next steps in mourning, what you need to do, and not really stressing about the financial components.
And then I think you kind of settle into a monitor mode. You draw up your wills, you look at your life insurance policies, you look at your powers of attorney, any representation agreements, desires for end-of-life care. Do you put it in a do not resusc order or no cardiopulmonary resuscitation, as the case may be? You have to kind of look at all of those lifestyle kind of end-of-life choices. Again, just terribly fun. But
I mean, so there's a list, and obviously we're not the source for all the things that you need to do in terms of getting all your documents, but it's just to be mindful that there are a bunch. Now, as we wrap up here, is there sort of one thing that you see is important but maybe missed on a consistent basis across everything we're talking about here today, just to be mindful of? Like for me, it's just not. Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, the big thing was like just not really thinking about disability insurance or long-term care insurance and those type of things, and to make sure you've at least looked into it and addressed it how you want to.
I'm going to be a bit controversial here and say the one thing I think you need to think about is the fact that you're going to die. What? And it's you're going to die. It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen. And it's just something none of us want to face. Who does? But we have obligations to people that we care about. And I think the best way to honor them is to make preparations, that they're burdened as little as possible because of the transition. They're already going to be grieving because of your passing. Let's make this easy on them, as the case may be.
That's great advice and a great place to wrap up. So I'm here with David Bilinsky, who's been kind enough to join us as he's battling a cold here. So thank you, David. And we've been talking about planning for retirement and, importantly, the unexpected that may happen. And the most important thing, as David just emphasized here, the goal, on a positive sense, is to ensure that you're giving your family, your loved ones, peace of mind should something happen. And we all obviously know that something is going to happen at some point. Hopefully it's the very, very, very far down the road. But again, just giving that family peace of mind. So David wrote an article in the ABA's Law Practice today, How to Deal with the Unexpected When Preparing for Retirement. I'll include that in the show notes so you can take a look at that. David, is there anything else you want to highlight or plug as we depart here today?
Just your practice management advisor is a great resource in every state or province, as the case may be. They have, at least we did, tons of resources that are freely made available to them. They're also available for consulting. Talk to them about all of these circumstances. They'll recommend, they'll have insights into your local state circumstances and what is best advised for you in your circumstance. So I think they're they're free, or at least most of them are. We were. And that's a great resource. There are lawyers that have been there and they've helped thousands of people. They're there to help.
Yeah, great advice. Well, David, thank you so much. I'm very grateful for you joining me today again with a cold. And so this is David Bilinsky, everybody. That's going to be it for today. Again, we've got some great shows coming up. So please stay tuned and check out what we've got coming. But until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marsh, and I appreciate you joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other lawyers who might benefit. You can find more resources and insights on building a thriving law firm at alphalawyer.io or the Alpha Lawyer YouTube channel. Till next time, keep building the firm of your dreams so you can live your best life. I have one final question. I think this is maybe the most important question that we should all be considering as we eyeball retirement, and that is, should we buy an RV?
Now, there are RV people and there are not RV people, but if you are open to hitting the road and designing your own schedule and following your nose, I mean, a lot of friends of mine love going on cruises. I'm not a sheep. I hate to be herded. I don't want to know that I have to be somewhere at 8 o'clock in the morning and blah, 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 and back at the boat for 4. Otherwise, you're going to miss it and it's going to sail off. The heck with that noise. Give me my wheels and get the open road, and I can determine my own fate. And if I want to stay somewhere for a couple of days, we have had some absolutely remarkable experiences in the RV. One of which I will relate. There's a road from Utah down into Arizona called the Moki Dugway, and it looks like you're driving off the side of the Grand Canyon. And we pulled our RV down there, and then you get to an area. It's Bureau of Land Management land, so it's boondocking, which means you're camping without any services. But it's a certified dark sky location. I mean, there is nobody. You're kind of northeast of Monument Valley, and you pull off onto this area, and your neighbor's maybe half a mile away from you or something like that, and then the sun sets and the stars come out, and you grab your recliner chair and you sit back, and it is absolutely mind-boggling what you see.
And that's so those kind of you're ever going to get staying in a hotel, right? Because you need to get way far away from everything in order to get that kind of view, right?
You've got to get away from any kind of light pollution at all, and you're miles and miles from miles and miles, and that kind of experience is mind-blowing. It is really, really cool. And so another one was we were pulling into San Diego, and we had a campsite at the top of a hill that overlooked San Diego. And as we're pulling in, I see something in the sky, and I turned to Colleen, my wife, and I said, "That's not a plane. What is it?" And I pulled out my phone and started recording it. Well, it was a missile taking off from Vandenberg Air Force Base, and we watched it track through the sky, and after it had gone, of course, we were speaking to our neighbors, and they went, Oh, yeah, you see that all the time, those rockets coming off of Vandenberg. And I mean, to me, who never sees a rocket launch, that was just mind blowing, especially since it was serendipitous. It was just suddenly it was there and over the ocean. And
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. I've seen a bunch of rockets launched in Florida and Cocoa Beach, right south of Cape Canaveral, and I do remember the very first one I saw completely unexpected, and it's a pretty extraordinary sight to see. But David, I never really thought I'd be somebody that would be interested in an RV, but you've gotten me rethinking it. So it sounds like you can have some really amazing experiences that you're probably not going to get. But we were talking off camera here and off mic about some of the traveling you've done across the lower 48 of the U.S. and across Canada. It does sound pretty amazing. So, well, thanks for that, David. That's I think going to wrap us up here. Now we've got officially all the most important information that we're gonna need to go into retirement. Yeah, maybe consider getting an RV. All right, thanks, David.
happy trails, Jason. Take care. Thanks for having me.